may be found in this stresso ossidativo. Maybe it's important, maybe it's not. This is a book that has recently come out, 1998. Professor Luc Montagnier, the co-discoverer of HIV, was a senior editor. Oxidative stress in cancer, AIDS, and neurodegenerative diseases. There's a lot to know about the work of those scientists looking at oxidative stress as a disease mechanism. Perhaps I should only say here that the chemical process of oxidizing cultures has always been at the heart of creating what has been viewed as HIV. It's quite widely covered in the literature. People have been writing about oxidative stress. Just to show you, for example, last year was the first European conference on oxidative stress. You don't have to look very far in the scientific literature to see a growing body of papers looking at oxidative stress as a disease mechanism and antioxidation as a therapeutic mechanism. There really is quite a lot of literature on this, but for reasons that we know and have discussed, whether that literature is widely known is another question. And already, of course, some manufacturers are making products. I do not know if these products are good, perhaps they are, but these are new products which may be used as nutritional therapies. If people find that they are unwell, perhaps the important thing to say is that the majority of people in Europe who have positive HIV tests on this deeply questionable technology are not ill people. The majority of test-positive people in Europe are well, and I hope that they stay that way. Thanks very much.
Ci vuole sempre l'apparecchio? Ancora quello, va bene. Allora chiediamo scusa purtroppo con il nostro tecnico. Facciamo 5 minuti di intervallo. Okay. 5 minuti di intervallo, così rimettiamo l'apparecchio sopra purtroppo. Va bene. 5 minuti di intervallo. 5 minuti. Acqua? Sì, là. Ok. Però tornate presto, 5 minuti perché abbiamo un lungo tragitto da compiere. Bene, allora riprendiamo i lavori, per favore sedetevi. Per favore sedetevi, riprendiamo i lavori. Allora, quindi passiamo adesso alla esposizione di Peter Duesberg. Se non ho capito male, questa volta riguarda il cancro. Ok. Ok, Questa mattina ha accennato ancora alla questione dell'AIDS, adesso intorno al cancro. Allora gli passiamo la parola. Grazie.
Okay. I'm not saying I will not say anything about AIDS anymore. We could, anytime you want to discuss it, we can come back to it, but I thought now is the time, okay, to make it coherent. Yeah. Okay, so for 100 years now, approximately, for a century now, cancer is blamed on what is called a somatic mutation. The word was first used, I think, actually in the English literature by Tisser, is the name, Tyccer. And that means somatic mutation. Soma means the body. That's a mutation that you're not born with, at least not all of them you're born with. If you were born with that mutation, it goes without saying, you wouldn't look like you do. You would look like a hamburger, probably, or like a meatball. You would be born as a cancer, and that wouldn't look very pretty. You would not be recognized. So whatever causes cancer is thought to be and said to be a mutation, a genetic change that occurs after you're born, and that's why it's called a somatic mutation. There are congenital mutations, whether you're blonde or brunette, or 6 feet tall or 5 feet tall, whether you're German or Frenchman. These are genetic mutations, but that are in your genes. But this type of mutation is after you were born. You're not born with cancer. So that concept that it's a mutation, some sort of a somatic mutation, explains why cancer is irreversible. It is not really curable, and it's not spontaneously disappearing. There are always some rare exceptions and rare claims, but typically cancer is a progressive and, unfortunately, typically fatal disease. And it also explains one other thing that scientists call clonal. That is to say, a cancer, the whole mass of a cancer, comes from one single cell that has gone wrong, typically. Clonal means all cells have one common ancestor. And that you can often see quite easily, or sometimes not so easily, when you look at other mutations, sometimes not mutations that causing the disease, but there's a mutation here, a mutation there, a virus in there, or there's a gene from your mother in that cell rather than one from your father, whereas your organs, your liver, nose or your ass, what have you, are always hybrids, mosaics of your mother and your father. A cancer is either all your father or all your mother, meaning it came from one cell, not from both. Right? So that has been accepted, and there's some proof for it, that it's a mutation. It's consistent with its irreversibility, with its clonality, with its not being there at birth. But it has not been settled in 100 years of research and billions of dollars and thousands and hundreds of thousands of scientific papers what kind of a mutation it is that causes cancer. Although everybody swears by Bibles this is a mutation, nobody has been able to name a specific mutation that has ever caused cancer in humans, that is. Not one is known. The textbooks are full of genes, cancer genes. We have lists of them. These are all hypothetical genes which are correlated with and found there in cancer, but there's not one set of genes or one particular gene that we can say, here it is, we have it now, we put it in a normal human cell or in an animal, and that cell will soon be a cancer cell. That proof is not there to this day. Now there are two basic choices for mutations, or for mutations to occur in human cells, in animal cells, in plant cells alike. One is called a gene mutation, that is a single gene has changed in some way or another. So as Gregor Mendel observed, the plant, the flowers of the peas are no longer red, now they're white, or they're white and red. This is one single gene, a color gene that has changed. Blonde or brunette, black and white, well, there's probably a few more, but it's a small number of genes. Sometimes it's just a single gene that makes that difference. So that's one way for nature to change things. And the other is called aneuploidy, a word that is hardly used currently, was once quite popular. That is a change in the number of chromosomes that we are made of. Chromosomes are the big packages of genes that, or packages in which genes are packaged in a cell. In humans, we have normally 23 chromosomes. I have sketched it here. So they compare to genes like a book. Yeah, the chromosomes compare to genes like a book to a sentence. A sentence would be a gene, a chromosome is a book. So we have 23 chromosomes, but about somewhere between 100,000 and a million genes. So we have lots and lots of genes, but rather few chromosomes. 23. I mean, I sketched them here now, just roughly. If you are normal, you have 23 chromosomes. And if you're male, you have a Y and an X at the end, and if you are female, you have two X's. So that defines the human species in terms of packages of information. Now this number is relatively fixed for humans, but under very rare conditions it can be changed, and then we call that aneuploidy. When that number doesn't add up to 23, that's called aneuploidy. That's a chromosome number, or sometimes even structure mutation. There's only one form of aneuploidy, only one form of such mutation that is compatible with survival that you can be born with, and it's Down syndrome. That's the smallest human chromosome here. One of the smallest is 21. It's a very small one. When that one is just doubled, or instead of two, instead of a pair, it's just one, you have Down syndrome. And that is phenotypically a disaster. Your life expectancy is 30 years, your IQ is way down, your metabolism is difficult, you are sterile. I mean, you are full of problems just for one extra completely normal chromosome or one missing completely normal chromosome. So that's one type of mutation, and the other is the gene mutation. And for some reason or another, science has yet to distinguish cancer research whether it's one or the other mutation that is to be blamed for cancer. With all that research of 100 years, we have not been able to draw the line yet. Popularly, we claim it's gene mutation, but the other one has certainly not been ruled out. And the two make very different predictions. You know, this is how, in the laboratory or in experiments, you can tell one alternative from the other. You say, hypothesis one, it's a gene mutation. What are the predictions for gene mutation? Does that fit with cancer, with the reality of cancer, with the observations of cancer, with how cancer is caused and how it's developing? Or does aneuploidy fit better with cancer? That's how you can eventually decide what is the cause and what is the collateral accidental mutation. Is it aneuploidy or is it gene mutation? In fact, you can learn a little bit from just studying where these mutations are before you even move into cancer. Nature uses gene mutation, just one gene in a chromosome. It's so small on this scale, I couldn't even show it to you. It would be like one, as I said, it's like one sentence in a book. It's a tiny, tiny element. It uses that for minor adjustments in a species. Makes you a little taller, or a little small, or a little stronger, or a little blonder, or a little darker, whatever it's called for. But changing the number of chromosomes is reserved for very serious and, in fact, in all terms, completely irreversible changes. That is speciation. When nature decides from now on, or your offspring, your son or your daughter is no longer a human, but is now a primate, is a monkey or a chimpanzee, that number is going to be changed. Chimpanzees have 24 pairs of chromosomes. So orangutans have 25, and mice have 20, and rats have 22, and some hamsters have 11. So when those numbers are changed, it's very serious and it's very irreversible. And guess where it's also changed? in cancer. There isn't one solid report in the literature in those 100 years of research of a solid cancer. Leukemias are sort of an exception, of a breast cancer, a colon cancer, a prostate cancer, a lung cancer, where this number is normal. It's always changed. And if you had to make an intuitive choice between the two mutations, if you were God and wanted to cause cancer, or nature, somewhere in between, the chromosomes are your better bet, because it's the big change. Now you're changing volumes in your library rather than sentences in your book. You're making big changes. And when you look at cancer and compare to normal, you see we are not talking about minor adjustments from blonde to brunette or from 6 feet tall to 5 feet tall. There you have a change that is so different that is not comparable to any other mutation. The cancer cell is what we call, for that reason, autonomous. It grows on its own. It doesn't respond to the many controls that keep our cells in check, that keep the nose roughly 1 foot, half a foot long for 80 years rather than letting it grow, that keep your eyes in the middle of your face rather than moving them to your ass, or that keep your arms 3 feet tall instead of 3 feet long instead of let them grow 9 or 10 feet. These controls are, whatever they are applied to all cells in your organism at all times, keep it very much in check. The only cell that doesn't follow orders, that is very non-German type of cell, that is the cancer cell. That grows totally on its own, does what it wants. It is even the only one that has a passport to travel in the body. It doesn't have to stay in the liver like your liver cells do for the 80 years you can count on. The cancer cell can say, goodbye liver, I move to the lung or to the kidney or to the brain. I'm metastasizing now. It's not very nice, but the cancer cell is the only one that can do that. There's no mutation known ever that allows a cell in a man or in an animal to move from one place to another. It has a different metabolism. A pathologist can tell just from looking at a slide, Jesus, that nucleus is way too big, this pap smear looks bad, you may have cancer. Or this biopsy from your colon looks bad, or this biopsy from your lung looks bad, because the nucleus is different, the metabolism is different, the shape is different, it can travel around, it can metastasize, it can invade, and it's autonomous, and it never does anything useful. It only works for itself. All cells in your body, all of them, are following orders. They are like soldiers in the whatever kind of good army. There's nobody working for himself. They all do something for the organism, except the cancer cell, only works for itself. So there are big differences between the two of them. And they would be much more compatible with a big change than with a small one. Moreover, the cancer cell is also what you, or carcinogenesis, the process of changing a cell to a cancer cell, is very hard to reconcile with a conventional mutation. Conventional mutations are sudden and immediately. Either you do it in cell culture with a cell, you add a mutagen and you see the results within a short time, bacteria you see it, or it happens at your birthday or conception day. When you conceived, something changes, some gene is mutant, and now as soon as you're born or as soon as you can detect it, you're changed. But not so with cancer. It's an exceedingly slow process. You know, if you're now x-rayed, or is Hector still around? He keeps smoking, he's still alive. You know, he should be dead a long time ago, but he's and all these carcinogens is still alive. It's an exceedingly slow process. You introduce the carcinogen now, and you can count on 20, 30 years before you have a serious high risk of cancer. And you have to keep adding and adding and adding to it, typically. That is very incompatible with gene mutation, but as you'll see, possibly quite compatible with aneuploidy. It's certainly compatible with how nature changes the species. It's not something that happens suddenly and not something that happens every day. It's a very slow process. In fact, since we are around, we have never observed a new species appearing spontaneously, an animal or plant or even a fungus. We have seen species disappearing all the time, endangered ones, as we call them then when they're gone. but we have never seen a new one coming, although everybody says, oh, Darwin, evolution of species, where has ever one evolved that we have watched? It's an extremely rare process that this will happen. So, as I hinted at, we have these two mutations to choose from, very different consequences, very different ranges of affecting our phenotypes, that is our behavior and our functions. And yet, the conformist view, the vast majority of cancer researchers nowadays agrees or consents that the mutation that changes a normal cell to a cancer cell is a gene mutation. It's 1, 2, or a set of up to 6 or 7 genes that, when mutated, convert that cell to a cancer cell. And from that one cancer cell now grows up a clonal cancer. And when that process is complete, you're gone. And the cancer is gone too. So now, as I said, we can tell whether this is good or bad hypothesis by looking at the predictions that this hypothesis would make. Well, by the way, I want to show you an original picture actually here of a human cancer cell that we have just been looking at. Just happen to have one here. That is a typical one here. Have a look at this. You could probably count roughly yourself. There's one on top and one on bottom. That's a real picture of how these chromosomes look. You can count, this is more than 46. I said 23 pairs. They all come in pairs, these chromosomes. 2 of each. So if the total number is 46, that would be a normal cell. This, however, is a cancer cell, and that, if you count it, if you took the time, it's around 80 chromosomes. So we have here 40 more chromosomes than your mother gave you at your birthday. That's pretty far out, pretty big change. Now, back then to the hypothesis that is now the textbook hypothesis, the hypothesis prevailing in all cancer research papers now, that is that gene mutations are causing cancer. That you change singular genes, either you inactivate or you activate a gene by a deletion, by a so-called point mutation, that one nucleotide is replaced accidentally by another, it loses its promoter or it's rearranged. And that hypothesis makes 6 easy predictions that you can easily follow even if you're not in the business. Here, and I have listed them here. Here they are. So one of these predictions would be that carcinogens, substances that cause cancer, are mutagens. Now, that is true for some of them, but certainly not for all of them. And in fact, it was the discovery in 1927 by Miller in Texas, working with Morgan and Drosophila, that X-rays, Röntgenstrahlen, if you don't know, and so the Röntgenstrahlen, which were long known as carcinogens, they were known shortly after Röntgen invented them at the end of the 19th century, and they played around with them all day long. They x-rayed their hands and their feet, and soon Röntgen and some of his assistants and other people developed cancers. So they were known as carcinogens for over 100 years. But Muller then showed, he was a Drosophila geneticist, that X-rays mutate genes. And that there was, until then they were all working with spontaneous mutations, which is very tedious. If you can affect artificially or experimentally the mutation rate, it's much easier for a geneticist to find what gene maps where and where it is and what it does. And that was a breakthrough for genetics, like the discovery of the atom or the Planck, or the Planck that David already mentioned for physics. Now we had finally found the atoms of biology, namely the gene, with that discovery. That was one of the key experiments that identified the gene. We could single out one gene, knock it out, and the cancer researchers at the time, like now, were only too happy to say, this is what causes cancer. This is the mutation. And sure enough, we already knew that X-rays would be carcinogenic. It's a mutation of genes. But soon after, more and more carcinogens proved to be not mutagenic. And the list of them now is more than half of all known carcinogens are not mutagenic. Asbestos is perhaps the best example. That's the most inert substance you could possibly have, yet it's carcinogenic. It is not reactive. It is not chemically able to change a gene. It is as dead as a doornail. Asbestos is used to put on your brakes in a car or shield a rocket when it re-enters in the atmosphere because it's so inert. Yet it is carcinogenic. Another, chemically, by far the most effective carcinogens are the so-called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. These are aromatic compounds that are in tar and in oil. In fact, have also been found in cigarette smoke, a little bit of them. We have been exposed to them for a long time, and they are all very old. They are millions of years old. They have been sitting in the mineral oils without changing an atom for millions of years. They're very inert chemicals. For organic chemists, they're enviably stable. I mean, if you had to choose to be an organic molecule and want to live a long time, be a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon. You'll be around for a long, long time, unchanged. Yet, this is one of the best chemical carcinogens, and it is completely inert. Not like X-rays. X-rays, of course, can break DNA and RNA and everything. They're highly active, but this one is a so-called non-genotoxic carcinogen. Although there are conditions where it can be changed and forced to be mutagenic, but basically it's not. So prediction number one of the gene mutation hypothesis would be that carcinogens are mutagens because we mutate genes in order to cause cancer. The reality is some of them are, but a good number of them, and some of the very best known of them, are not. So that doesn't help this hypothesis a whole lot, because 50% true is actually false in science. It's either all or nothing in science. It's very digital. If something fits 50% a hypothesis, then it doesn't fit it at all. The next prediction would be, if it's gene mutation, that transformation occurs just as fast as mutation does. But as I already pointed out, it's the hallmark of science that you have lots and lots of time between exposure to a carcinogen and subsequent carcinogenesis. Even in the best experimental systems, you take this tar, these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, highly carcinogenic chemicals, and you paint it on a mouse every morning, over and over. So that poor thing is loaded with carcinogens every single day. And even then it takes 6 months at least for a tumor to show up. So it's extremely slow, but when you put a mutagen on there, you get mutations within 24 hours. So mutation is instantaneous, whereas transformation or oncogenic or malignant transformation is exceedingly slow, completely incompatible with the mutation hypothesis. There is another critical prediction. If mutation is causing cancer, then you should be able to find mutant genes in a cell that are actually specific for this event and able to transform when you isolate them properly and put them in another cell, convert that to a cancer cell. Well, that's what the molecular geneticists have been trying for 20 years. 2 of them have gotten Nobel Prizes for it. Others are in the academy. Many have published in Nature, high-profile papers. But the bottom line is, not one of them has been shown to do the job to this date. Not one gene, as I pointed out, can be named, or combination of genes from any cancer that, when extracted and put into another cell, will convert that to a cancer cell. With many other genetic properties, we can easily do that. We can take a gene out for hemophilia, or we can take a gene out for color, or for some enzyme function, and we put it in another cell, and sure enough, that starts making insulin or makes the right hemoglobin, if you like that. That works perfectly well. But cancer, no. Hasn't worked in 20 years, despite hundreds and hundreds of papers of trying. Now, you would also predict, if cancer is due to gene mutations, that these mutations are just as stable as any other mutation is. So as I said again, if you were born as a brunette, you're going to stay a brunette for the rest of your life, except you turn gray. That's another kind of mutation. But it's very stable. Or if your nose, if you have your Habsburg lip, it's going to stay Habsburg lip for the rest of your life. You're not going to change that unless you go to plastic surgery. But not so with cancer. The cancer cell is what you call notoriously unstable. That is one of the big problems in chemotherapy. You find today a cancer, oh God, you have a chemotherapy, and you treat the patient, and the miracle occurs, the cancer shrinks, and you think you have finally gotten the better of it, and it's gone. Well, unfortunately, within 3 to 6 months, the cancer patient knocks back at your door and says, it's back again. So what happened is, in a very short time, the cancer cell has changed. It has mutated to some other phenotype that is now resistant to that chemical. But you are not. If you get the chemotherapy again, your hair fall out again, you start having diarrhea, you're losing weight, you are stable. Your normal cells have not changed, but the cancer cell has changed. And that is notorious for many other properties. It metastasizes to the liver today, and then you take it out there, and tomorrow it's in the kidney or in the brain or wherever it is. No other cell is so changeable as this. There's no precedent for such variable, unstable phenotype in genetics anywhere, except in cancer. Now, of course, lastly, you would predict something that is actually so obvious and nobody seems to bother and check about it. You would predict, if it's a gene mutation, that the chromosomes stay the same. And you and I, and we are all differing by minor or major mutations, but we all have the same chromosomes, same number of chromosomes, 23, as I pointed out earlier. If you change your number of chromosomes, it's over. You're no longer a human species. Well, you could be borderline, you could have Down syndrome. Sure, I don't want to cast aspersions on Down syndrome patients, they have trouble enough, but they're sterile. They don't match up anymore. If it doesn't match up exactly in the chromosome number, it's over. You don't need condoms any longer or safe sex. Or with a gorilla, you can date a gorilla anytime you want. Where's Charlie Schechter from Africa? He should know. But you don't need, because they have different chromosomes. No matter how hard you try, you won't have any problems with conception there because it doesn't match. So, but cancer cells are the only cells in the body that are consistently, completely aneuploid. They don't have diploid chromosomes. But all other mutations do not depend on changing the chromosome number to change the phenotype. This one conspicuously always does. So on these grounds, we, that is Rasnick and I and a couple of others in this world, there's a group in Houston, Brinkley, and who's come to a similar conclusion, have recently reconcluded, and I'll tell you in a minute, we're only rediscovering good things. It has been said before, 100 years before, when they didn't have the burden to deal with gene mutation yet, that gene mutation is not a probable cause of cancer. And the troubles with that theory could possibly only be solved if we choose another. Namely, the other choice is aneuploidy, that nature has to offer to change phenotypes very dramatically, as I pointed out, and very irreversibly. And that is the aneuploidy hypothesis. And sure enough, if you look in the literature, 100 years ago, it was David von Hansemann, somewhere in Berlin, who first described, looking with a microscope at cancer cells, what they called asymmetric mitosis. When the cell is dividing, it doesn't divide the chromosomes evenly between the daughter cells. This is roughly how that should look, but didn't look like that cancer cell. See, do we have pointers sort of a little pointer like this? No. A stick? A light? Okay. So,
La possibilità di illuminare.
oh, well, it's all right. Now, well, you see, up there, it's even. Let's say at least that's your level. Okay, that's better. Now, see, this. Okay, a microphone here. Right. Well, you can roughly follow it. You can see here is what happens when the cell divides. It lines up its chromosomes roughly in the middle and then pulls one half set over here and one half set over there. And then you get two cells which have now the same set of chromosomes. This process is always completely symmetrical. It's a miracle how that works technically. You know, considering you have 23 pairs in every single cell, and you have 10 to the 14 cells in your body, it worked out 10 to the 14 cells for us, when we 14 times for us when we're sitting here. But occasionally, that process can go wrong. Oh, there he comes. Did you talk to that gorilla? There was a gorilla calling from Africa. He wants to have a date with you. It was probably a lady, I think. Yeah. You have that light? She remembered you from your recent trip down there. He said you never called and you never wrote, and she wants you to call her right now. Yeah. She has a cellular telephone up on the tree. I heard it last night. Yeah, that's what we got here. Okay. So you see, this is what is normally happening, and what von Hansemann then observed in 1890, that it's asymmetric. So that instead of pulling the pairs symmetrically, let's say like you snap here that cord, then this pair would go, both chromosomes would go over here, these would be divided, and now you have aneuploidy. You have here, let's say this was number 1 chromosome pair. The 2 new number 1s would both end up in one cell, and the other cell would end up with no number 1. And that can occasionally happen, that you don't pull them apart symmetrically. If this breaks or something else goes wrong, then you get asymmetric mitosis. That's what he described. And in this very same paper, in the subsequent papers, he suggested that this may have something to do with cancer. But that was at the time when they didn't know what a chromosome was and didn't know what genes was. It changed within 10 years when Boveri, as an embryology or zoology professor working in Würzburg and in Naples, down in Napoli at the Royal Laboratory, he studied sea urchins in the Mediterranean, sea urchin babies, and he found out that chromosomes must be the genes, because he could see that girls and boys had different chromosomes, they had their sex chromosomes different, and he could also interfere with the process by heating them or hitting them over the head or something like that, and then he got what's called now aneuploidy, uneven distribution of chromosomes. So Boveri was aware that chromosomes are essentially genes, they are the genetic material, and Hansemann had shown in cancer they were asymmetric, and Boveri then formulated the first genetic theory of cancer. He said cancer must be due to abnormal chromosome numbers, or aneuploidy, as it is called now. That word was not also known at that time. And that theory was quite popular for a long time, until about in the 60s and 70s, when technology got good enough to identify every single chromosome all the time. And then people found in clonal cancers a whole plethora of chromosomes. Every single cell had a different set of chromosomes. And most scientists adore specificity, and for good reasons. Science is a reductionist field, you want something specific. But when every single cell in the same cancer had different numbers of chromosomes, they said that can only be a consequence of something like a gene mutation that caused the cancer. So once that happened, everything is out of control, and even the chromosomes fall apart. But here we reconsidered, knowing well that the gene mutation hypothesis couldn't do it. David and I proposed then, well, maybe aneuploidy is in fact clonal. The fact that it's aneuploidy is clonal, but the particular chromosome combination does not have to be clonal. In fact, if you really think it through, it cannot be clonal, because the spindle apparatus like here is a very highly balanced, like a violin or like a cable bridge, a suspension bridge. Everything has to be in the right balance, as we say, on the right. You have to have the right numbers of cables or suspension lines, or in the violin, the string and the bow have to be in the right balance in order to make the right sound. So when you have extra chromosomes making, let's say, these so-called tubulin cables, or one that makes an extra, this body is called a centrosome, there's a third one here pulling from 3 directions. This would happen if you change the number of chromosomes. You generate constantly new variations of the chromosomes. You build in an error that it's propagating itself. You have made a mistake in the genes of making the machinery that normally breaks it up symmetrically. So you build always another skewed cell that will keep changing and changing, and that explains exactly what we were looking for, and that scientists have been looking for an explanation for all the time. Why are cancer cells genetically unstable? They keep changing themselves all the time because it's not an evolutionary stable form of a new species, but it is a new species. It has changed the chromosome numbers. And that's exactly what explains the cancer cell. It is phenotypically different like a species. It's not autonomous, it's not balanced and selected yet, but it goes its own way and is unpredictable. So the conclusion of our story then would be that is, well, here's a schematic drawing, maybe just to summarize it once more. This one? Okay. Well, where's Charlie just gave me the light? Oh, so, okay. So we propose then the whole process to be. Okay, thanks. Okay. So we propose then that carcinogenesis follows essentially a two-stage mechanism. The first stage, here's the normal cell. It is now exposed to a carcinogen, X-rays, tar, asbestos, hydrazine, dioxin, or any of these substances that are known to cause cancer, and that changes the normal chromosomes into an aneuploid cell, and that destabilizes the karyotype because all chromosomes typically contribute to that spindle apparatus. It's a huge thing. It's the most complicated thing the cell will ever do. Once that is out of whack, you have extra chromosomes, centromeres or extra cables. It will always change things because it's unstable. It's disquiet. Now that initiates an autocatalytic process of changing and changing. And typically, when you change something that has been tuned so well as a normal cell, the chromosomes to work together for billions of years, life is about 3 billion years, when you change it randomly, you make it worse. Typically, most of these random changes, and luckily for us, die. They're lethal. So you can smoke a lot of cigarettes or use a lot of carcinogens or be on this planet for quite a while and have accidental aneuploidies, which happen here and then, and most of them just will die because they are less viable than a normal cell. But occasionally, like in roulette, you may generate a combination that has all the chromosomes in it that the cell needs for viability, but a few that now allow it to travel. Give it a passport and say, goodbye liver, I'm moving to the heart. Or goodbye heart, I'm going to the breast or to the lungs. And that can affect other things as well. It can affect the volume of the cell, it can affect the metabolism of the cell, and it can give you all these different variants that we are so well familiar with cancer. It could be a fast-growing, a slow-growing, and in situ cancer. So this hypothesis theoretically seems to explain everything, because we are so smart, of course, and now it's only to be tested. And what could be concluded, even if we could prove all of this is true, one prediction would be, experimental prediction, that aneuploidy actually shows up in pre-neoplastic cells. It would show up there before you even have cancer, because it's extremely unlikely that immediately you would get a combination that wins, like you go to the casino and win for the first time you play. Very unlikely. And that is something we can test because we have plenty of time. You see, the time between carcinogen, experimental carcinogenesis, and cancer is months, years often. So you have time to look. You treat it with carcinogen and look, and sure enough, this is what you can actually see. This here is a hamster that we use. Normally it has 22 chromosomes. So the technique of looking at chromosomes is not, well, is very solid and very good, but it is not error-free. When you break the cell, a few chromosomes sometimes are lost and splash around, so you have a relatively high noise level, 10 or 20% technical aneuploidy, losses or gains through accidents. But it's a fairly stable number anyway, and you can see here's the normal cell. There's very little aneuploidy. Much of this is probably artifact, but a tiny bit could be native. It could, right now, 1 out of 1,000 in your lymphocytes are aneuploid, a tiny bit aneuploid. They have one chromosome too many, one too few. But here you can see that same cell under the same conditions after treatment with dimethylbenzantrazine shows considerably more aneuploidy. And here's one that was treated with cytosine arabinocyte, that is actually a genotoxic carcinogen, that is actually 65% aneuploid 4 days after treatment. This aneuploidy is not going to last. Much of this is going to disappear again because it's lethal. But you scramble things around and then many of them die, and if you're unlucky, some of them survive eventually to develop into cancer. So the prediction of this model that you generate first a preneoplastic aneuploidy, and then this may over time evolve into cancer is confirmed by this experiment. It also puts the word preneoplastic, which was always sort of vague. What did the doctor mean it's preneoplastic? You look at smear, it's a little bit more pink, it's a little more oozing, a little more dirty, a little more this, a little more that. This would put it on a scientific basis. We could say the basis for preneoplasia, that a cell is now truly preneoplastic rather than just inflamed, as is often the case. Over 50%, David, is that the right number? Over 50% of pap smears, for example, a cervical test, are actually false alarms because you just have an inflammation. But if the cells are aneuploid, then it's time to be serious and to do something about it. Whatever you can do about it, cancer is not terribly much, but you can do something. And now, here's the last quantitative thing. Much of this is actually based on conventional biochemical analysis, how a gene is converted to function. Very classical biochemical analysis, Meyerhoff, or not, what is it here, Michaelis-Menten constant, the biochemists have done that for a long time. Show here how changing a single gene or a few genes change the function. So this is a bit, David Rasnick is the one who has done all the math on this, but I want to show you this line here. This is one that is the normal phenotype of a cell, the biochemical activity in a normal cell, unperturbed. Right? Nothing has happened to it. Totally normal is 1. It's an arbitrary number. You can set it. So here's my normal cell. You take any one normal cell, say that is your normal liver cell, it would be 1. Or your normal colon cell would be 1. No? Now you introduce a gene mutation in that cell. As I told you, it's like changing a sentence in 23 volumes of books. The changes that this would do are so small, it wouldn't even deviate from that line. They are undetectable as a whole. Although this is what all cancer researchers now insist is the cause of such fundamental changes as colon cancer. Here is specifically the hypothesis that is most popular right now, published in Nature and Science and everything alike. Vogelstein is the author, a cancer researcher from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. He says 7 mutations are to be claimed. Well, this is the fraction of genes that represent 7 mutations out of 100,000 estimated active genes in a human cell. This would be the fraction. Phi is the fraction. And this is how it would change that cell. Even if you make this, if you double or triple or make, we have a mutation that makes it, this would be normal activity 1, but this would be making it 1.5 times as active, and this 2 times and 2.5 and 3 times. All these hypothetical activations or here inactivations wouldn't hardly make a difference. The only thing that a gene mutation could create everything to a stop is a so-called null mutation. If it's a gene that you really need, and if you lose it completely, then the cell is dead. But that's not a bad thing for cancer. You can start cancer with a dead cell. The risk for cancer is something that makes a cell more active or contributes something, not something that pulls the wheel out of your car and you sit on the ditch. That is not a risk for cancer. But look what happens when you now change thousands of genes. When you take your Encyclopedia Britannica and add 3 or 4 volumes that you bought on the flea market and throw a few away and turn a few upside down and rip a few out and bind them again, then you're talking big. Now you're changing things dramatically. Here, these are now thousands of genes changed, and this would be the changes that a hypothetical colon cancer would produce. This here barely above the back line is Down syndrome. You remember I mentioned that that is the smallest chromosome or aneuploidy that is compatible with survival. You can be born with it. Any other chromosome abnormalities, if they would happen, that's nature's checkpoint for chromosomes. Down the toilet you go. It would be an abortion probably long before you even knew you were pregnant, if it's a serious aneuploidy. If it's a minor one like Down syndrome, a tiny one, the tiniest one, some kids or babies survive when they're born, and I said the consequences are rather traumatic. But anything that is in that range up here, where you change things, where you change many chromosomes, many-fold, as is typically in cancer, that would never see the light of day. But if it happened, it would change everything in either negative way, when it's a negative aneuploidy is found in some cancers, or positive way out of proportion biochemically. And this is exactly, again, what you see in a cancer cell. The metabolism is different, proteins are different, the surface antigens are different, it can travel anywhere, it is completely different. So it seems that this hypothesis meets the predictions or the observations of cancer at this point very well. Now, what does it mean in terms, can we cure cancer? That is, of course, I'm not quite as optimistic as David, who thinks we can. Well, one thing we could offer, that is an improvement that this hypothesis compared to the other could. If this hypothesis were accepted and confirmed, we could prevent cancer by looking in food, in medications, for substances that cause aneuploidy rather than gene mutation. Now all tests for carcinogens are based on the hypothesis that gene mutations cause cancer. So they actually check in the so-called Ames test only for bacterial gene mutations. If something mutates, they say, oh, it's probably a carcinogen, let's not do it. Or even in cigarette smoke, they try to reduce the carcinogen level by reducing the mutagen level. But if mutation is not the cause of cancer, but aneuploidy is, that's what we should check for and control. We could possibly reduce the cancer risk significantly by checking for aneuploidizing agents, or anugens, or aneuploidogens, as they call it in the specialized literature, and could thus improve cancer prevention, and also prevention at the clinical level. If you have a preneoplastic or suspect lesion, like a pap smear, a biopsy in a colon or in the lung or something, you could immediately tell from the chromosome number whether it's a benign tumor with normal chromosomes, or it's not even a tumor at all, it's a inflammation, or whether it's malignant or potentially malignant if it's aneuploid. Whether we can cure it, well, David will talk about that. Thank you. So I'd be glad to take questions on this from anybody. David could answer some questions, like this one.
È chiaro che ha elaborato una questione, quindi sulla causa, no? Sulla causa del cancro. Differente anche questa volta differente da quella diffusa, e questo comporta un approccio differente, no? E quello che noi gli chiediamo adesso è di svolgere dicevo che Peter Duesberg ha fornito una sua ipotesi, no? Una sua ipotesi differente da quella diffusa intorno alla causa del cancro. Ora è chiaro che di questa ipotesi dovremo discutere, no? Quindi volevo chiedergli primo se lui l'ha già scritta questa ipotesi, se si trova in uno scritto, se questo scritto possiamo leggerlo. Secondo, se può svolgere ulteriormente le ultime affermazioni che ha fatto, cioè sulle implicazioni, sull'approccio differente. Se la cura attuale, tra virgolette cura, chemioterapia, radioterapia, e solo adesso si comincia in Europa a parlare di altro, no? Di immunoterapia, di ipertermia, di altre cose, no? Di alimentazione, solo adesso, no? Si incomincia a parlare in Europa di questo, sempre di più bisogna dire, e bisogna dire che in Italia ormai da un anno questo campo è schiantato, cioè non c'è più la credenza nell'opinione comune, nell'establishment. L'establishment è stato scardinato anche dal dibattito causato da questa cura del professor Di Bella. Che sia giusta o non giusta, che sia efficace o non efficace la cura di Bella, sta di fatto che il dibattito ha scardinato questa mitologia intorno che il potere medico deteneva nei confronti, utilizzando insomma questo business principale, no? Business del cancro. C'era il professor Bucalossi, Pietro Bucalossi, che negli anni 80 diceva da noi, questo non è l'affare, non è il male del secolo, è il business del secolo, e si riferiva all'inizio degli anni 80 al cancro. Allora, di sicuro questo business del cancro in Italia ha tutto un potere consolidato, però questo potere è stato un po' messo in discussione, scardinato. Poi ha reagito come lobby, quindi falsificando la sperimentazione che Di Bella con il suo protocollo proponeva, il professor Di Bella. Ripeto, noi non prendiamo posizione sul fatto che Di Bella abbia ragione o non abbia ragione. Di sicuro lui non adopera la chemioterapia, non adopera la radioterapia e non adopera farmaci tossici. Nessun farmaco tossico. Questa è la novità, diciamo, di Di Bella, che sia poi efficace o non efficace, secondo alcuni è efficace, secondo ovviamente coloro che sostengono la chemioterapia e la radioterapia no. Però ci sono altri, anche indipendentemente da Di Bella, che non accettano più l'impostazione generale, l'impostazione comune, e quindi non accettano di utilizzare i farmaci tossici. E quindi quello che si diceva, no? Noi sentiremo domani il vice direttore scientifico dell'Istituto dei Tumori di Milano, che dice, lui fa questa distinzione, no? Il 10% sarebbero malati terminali, il 20% guariscono, il 70% invece potrebbero avere una cura per proseguire a vivere, ma non impegnata sul fronte dei farmaci tossici. Questo lo dice, siamo a livello del vice direttore scientifico dell'Istituto dei Tumori, questa è una cosa che non c'era prima, sarebbe stato pressoché impossibile 2 anni fa, prima del dibattito di Bella. Ora, anche Mattei, abbiamo un po' messo in discussione, ha giurato, qui non c'è il professor Pontigia, l'altra volta si ricorda che abbiamo avuto lo scontro, si è messo in discussione, adesso dice non utilizzerò più farmaci tossici e vorrebbe presentare, ha fantasticato un protocollo di cura non tossica. Comunque, ci interessa adesso per dire che questo dibattito intorno al cancro oggi mi sembra che arrivi in un momento in cui può essere davvero introdotta qualche novità, cioè senza che sia necessariamente insabbiata, ecco, questo, senza che l'apparato debba per forza prevalere. Questo apparato non è così saldo, non è così fermo, non è così immobile come sarebbe stato fino a 2 anni fa. Cioè non c'è gente in Italia che creda più ai medici, ai medici dell'apparato che dicono di voler curare il cancro con farmaci tossici, e quindi in base alla dottrina della mutazione genetica. No? Ora, vediamo a questa ipotesi che lei ha formulato oggi. Può aggiungere qualcosa alle ultime parole che ha detto, no? Quali potrebbero essere le implicazioni? Lo so che lei dice che non è ottimista, però forse anche questo è... Qui non si tratta di essere pessimisti o ottimisti. Si ricorda che diceva quell'amico russo? Ecco, che il pessimista è un ottimista ben informato. Un ottimista ben informato. Ecco. Ora bisogna che sia tanto bene informato da non essere nemmeno pessimista, né ottimista né pessimista. Ecco, allora, quindi anzitutto aprire un dibattito sulla questione del cancro come questione intellettuale è quello che stiamo facendo da alcuni anni. E come questione dell'AIDS, anzitutto come questione intellettuale, e quindi anziché come male dell'altro, malattia dell'altro, malattia mentale, perché poi è sempre malattia che deve significare la morte, che ha il tabù della morte. Quindi senza dover essere né pessimisti né ottimisti, verifichiamo quali sono intanto, se lei ha scritto questa ipotesi che ha formulato oggi, ipotesi o constatazione, diciamo ipotesi tra virgolette, però ipotesi anche come Charles Sanders Peirce dice, l'ipotesi è una specie di abduzione, no? Abduzione. Quindi quando le cose si fanno, l'abduzione è indispensabile, no? L'abduzione, quindi è la stessa catacresi, no? Allora, ammettiamo che sia per catacresi, che lei quindi propone questa ipotesi e quindi che ha delle implicazioni pragmatiche, ha delle implicazioni sulle cose da fare. Allora, adesso c'è tutta una dottrina, c'è una morale, c'è una serie di precetti, questo si può fare, quell'altro non si può fare, in base a questo tabù, che è appunto tabù della morte, che sarebbe significato dalla malattia mentale chiamata cancro, dalla malattia dell'altro chiamata cancro, e quando capita a sé allora si fa altro. Allora, prima di tutto chiaramente c'è un grande interesse da parte mia e da parte penso di altri in Europa, e quindi anche a Ginevra, a Losanna, a Parigi, a Bruxelles, no? All'Unione Europea, a Londra, per approfondire questa ipotesi. Ma ipotesi per noi che cosa comporta? Che sia nell'accezione di Peirce, di Charles Sanders Peirce, come abduzione, e quindi che implichi le cose da fare. Quali sono le cose che occorre fare? Perché finora noi abbiamo invece, questa è la dottrina della mutazione genetica, questa è la dottrina del cancro, e abbiamo invece delle ipotesi da fare, delle cose da fare, abbiamo una precettistica, una serie di imperativi che passano attraverso l'obbligo della cura, e diventa sempre l'obbligo della cura radicale. Quello che dice Pasquale Spinelli dirà domani è questo, che il 70% di quelle persone che non sono malati, cosiddetti malati terminali, devono essere trattati come malati terminali dall'apparato ospedaliero, farmaceutico, medico, legale, perché questo soddisfa tutte le esigenze delle industrie farmaceutiche e delle lobby. Ecco, questo vorrei che... Quali sono le implicazioni pragmatiche immediate. Ammesso che lei non è né ottimista né pessimista. Prego. Una piccola domanda. Prego.
Well, okay, I already pointed out briefly. In terms of prevention, there I think is plenty of reason for optimism. In fact, if aneuploidy is indeed the cause, we would no longer focus, or at least not exclusively focus, on substances that mutate genes. We would now look what's really causing it, namely at substances that cause aneuploidy. And as you can tell from the carcinogens that are already known, half of them are not even able to mutate a gene. That already tells us that we have been looking in the wrong direction here. That could change a lot of things. We could look at food, we could look at drugs, good ones and bad ones alike, and so that would improve things a whole lot. And now in terms of prevention, likewise, I mean, if you have an indeterminate pap smear or an indeterminate biopsy of adenoma in the colon or wherever it is, you could immediately tell whether it's benign or not if you relied on the chromosomes. Well, it's up there, but if you count those chromosomes and you find these numbers, you'd say it's high time to get out the knives or the guns or whatever is available right now. It's serious. But if you see the chromosome number is normal, then I think any conventional treatment and any optimism is justified. Then you try with chamomile infusion or with tea and just calm them down and see that the inflammation goes away, and you don't have the anxiety and you don't have the trauma of chemotherapy or knives or threats that are implied with the indefinite or indeterminate cancer diagnosis. So here in cancer prevention and I think also in diagnosis of lesions, we could make significant and truly optimistic prognosis. In terms of treatment, we cannot offer immediately anything better than what's known now, because we still are left with the task to remove these cancer cells. Okay, we can use the knife, that is the same for mutation or aneuploidy. Now with chemotherapy, sure, that is of course a Stone Age therapy. It has never been pretty, and it never will be, because it doesn't distinguish normal cells from cancer cells, and it will have tremendous collateral damage. But if the cancer cells are all chromosomally abnormal and the other cells are not, there may be a chance that something could be developed that sees chromosomal abnormalities. At least we have a target. It's a bigger target and an easier target than finding a point mutation in a gene. So at least theoretically there's some optimism, but I can't go any further at this point and say I can promise we can cure it somehow. There, I think. But in prevention and even in diagnosis of preneoplastic or lesions or under indeterminate lesions, there I think progress could be immediately or very soon be made. In fact, David may talk about it. Then. Okay. Yes, actually there are some. In fact, I could put them tomorrow on the transparency there. Yeah. Okay. So one of them is a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy. The first author is Ruhong Lee, and the title is Aneuploidy correlated 100% with chemical transformation of Chinese hamster cells. So that was an in vitro paper. There's one. It's not too many. We have only 3 or 4. And then we have one where David and I are both also in the academy. That deals with the daunting genetic instability of cancer cells in 98. Genetic instability of cancer cells is proportional to the degree of aneuploidy, exactly again as you would predict. The more abnormal the balance of these components of the spindle apparatus is, the more unstable the cell is getting. So that is essentially predicted. Then here's a largely theoretical paper, but it has a lot of practical connections in it. That's called Aneuploidy Affects Metabolic, How Aneuploidy affects metabolic control and causes cancer. It's in the, I love to use that word, prestigious British journal, biochemical journal, and David is the first author on that. He probably will talk a little more on this. In fact, that a diagram in the end that shows you the range of aneuploidy versus gene mutation, the mass behind it or the calculations behind it is all in that paper. And we have now 2 more irons in the fire. They are being rejected, as you can imagine, for 2 reasons, quite passionately now that people have paid a little attention to it. The first I got through under the radar. People didn't think I would have anything and said, okay, let them have it. But now they're getting a little apprehensive as they see there's something coming. And now the papers are being rejected by the courier at the in Washington, by the National Academy even. But I just got some good news. We just got a cable, one that had been rejected, accepted, and then pulled again for review, was just accepted yesterday. An unprecedented event altogether. I've never heard. Academy members typically are infallible. When you're in the National Academy, which I happen to be in from the days when I was still popular, I can send the papers there without review. And they are accepted. That used to be the rule. That's why people wanted to be in the Academy. You are like the Pope. When you talk in your field, you're infallible. When you say it's resurrection, then it's resurrection. No more questions asked. When you say it's aneuploidy, no more questions asked. But once you have a label of being a heretic, then things look different. Then you become an Untermensch. You get a little stars in there or swastika, whatever's on your label, and then they treat you like the Schwarze or whatever they want to mark. And then you become reviewed and rejected, and you have to rewrite things, and life is very different then. You don't get more cards. But anyway, we got one through with threats and lawyers and all the usual things. So that one is coming out. And one more that shows actually a very crucial part of the hypothesis, that you have aneuploidy before you get cancer. Because the conventional argument against aneuploidy is, that's what most cancer researchers would say, once the cell is transformed, everything is out of order, even the chromosomes fall apart. And there was a good reason, actually a reasonably good reason for saying that, until we had a good hypothetical explanation for it. If the chromosome, if the abnormality or the karyotype, the number of chromosomes is not specific in a specific tumor, how could it be a cause? It got to be some sort of a consequence. That's conventional scientific thinking and has a good reason. But we got around this by saying the specific thing is the aneuploidy. It's a bit like an uncertainty principle. Once you have aneuploidy, you no longer have classical numbers, hard numbers, because it is a self-destabilizing situation. It is not, you have, in fact, that's what, again, a British philosopher has predicted, scientist, Robin Holliday. He was in London until 5 or 10 years ago, now he's in Australia somewhere. He called it, he proposed it, but he keeps proposing always another thing. But this one was ingenious, and nobody took notice, and even we didn't notice it until recently somebody pointed it out to us. He called this chromosome error propagation. Once you have an error in the normal balance of chromosomes, it will constantly change itself. And that is essentially the driving force in evolution. Until this arrives at a new equilibrium, which is extremely unlikely, extremely rare. That's why it's so rare and unlikely that a new species ever shows up. We have never seen it happening. And that's why it's just as good to believe in the church and say God made us as we are. It's almost that good, or that unlikely, that you might as well take the Bible as the answer. But I just want to point out, it's extremely unlikely to get something that even as a parasite, cancer is a complete parasite, it couldn't walk on its own. But it can be a good parasite, even that is unlikely, because otherwise we would have cancer all the time. But something that is so, that is able to walk off and say, like a baby, now I'm my own species, I have 48 chromosomes, I'm a chimpanzee now, bye-bye mother. I go to the jungle, or whatever you will be, or an Übermensch, I go somewhere else. I have nothing to do with you anymore because I have a different set of chromosomes. That we have never witnessed and have never been able to experimentally reproduce. It must have happened, whether it happened spontaneously or there was somebody there who did it, that's It's actually really a good question. It's very hard to answer scientifically. The chances are so low that one or the other is almost equally good from a scientific point of view right now. Yeah. So, okay.
Vabbè, questi articoli noi, la nostra accademia non nazionale può pubblicare, non nazionale, però volevo fare una semplicissima domanda. Ripeto.
Oh, your microphone is off. I'm sorry. Is it on?
Sì, il microfono c'è.
No, she complains that you're off.
La traduzione. Allora, dicevo che la nostra accademia non nazionale può pubblicare queste conoscenze.
Cannot hear. Try this one. Try this one. Verdiglione. This one. Maybe. Oh, now it's on. Okay.
Pronto? Ecco. Allora, dicevo che la nostra accademia non nazionale può pubblicare questi scritti. Però adesso, mentre lei parlava, è venuta una domanda semplicissima. Lei crede nell'evoluzione biologica? Perché sono rimasto un po' inquieto quando lei ha detto questo. Lei crede proprio nell'evoluzione biologica? Prego.
I have to give you a communist answer now. Yeah. Like you said, what is a pessimist? Is a well-informed optimist? Is another communist line? In principle, yes. In principle, yes. But I don't know how. you know these jokes from Radio Everyone? In principle, yes. But when they ask, do you have cars in the Soviet Union? Of course. In principle, yes. But you have to wait 10 years to get one. Those were a standard line of communist jokes. So if you ask me about evolution, do I believe in it? In principle, yes. But I couldn't tell you how it would work. I mean, I could tell you what would have to happen. But this is so unlikely. Let's say your mother or my mother had given me, had made maybe 48 chromosomes. I would have a hell of a time to find it.
Il termine evoluzione l'ha adoperato lei poco fa.
Oh,
Poco.
I have to get used to this.
Poco fa, lei ha adoperato il termine evoluzione.
Yes.
Io le chiedo, quindi, siccome lei ha detto evoluzione, così è l'evoluzione, siccome io non accetto la dottrina dell'evoluzione, assolutamente, le chiedo se invece lei crede nell'evoluzione. Punto e basta. Lei può credere come non credere.
Well, actually, I'm very close to you. I'm saying it is so unlikely to go from one to the next species, at least from what I know or what people know about what seems to be known about science there, that it's clearly outside. It's a matter of belief, and that's not science. What you believe is for the weekend. You can believe in Allah and in Buddha and in anything. It is so unlikely that you would have to be to start a new species. Your mother would have to, or my mother would have had given me 48 chromosomes like the chimpanzee. Yeah? But then I would have, in order to propagate that property, let's say I'd come out rather than a Down syndrome as I am now, able to, let's say, heterosexual and everything, perfect. So you're now looking for a date. The only one you could possibly have offspring with, babies with, would also have to have 48 chromosomes. You would have to now find a female that would have a completely compatible chromosome abnormality as it is from your species. Any other species compared to ours is abnormal relative to that standard. That's what you'd have to find. You would have to really work hard on that one. It's harder than picking up HIV, I can tell you that. You have to go to a lot of single bars before you find your date with 48 chromosomes. You might never end up finding them. And the rest is over, then it's just over. So I have I'm becoming almost religious at this point. It's really difficult to see how you go from one to another species in practical terms.
Allora c'è un'altra domanda, poi però vorremmo sentire, poi c'è un'altra domanda, prego. Però con l'apparecchio, altrimenti la traduzione non avviene. C'è qui l'apparecchio.
E da quello che mi è stato di capire, la causa del cancro si sposta da il tipo, la qualità di una cellula a una procedura che è quella della divisione cellulare, se ho capito giusto. Cioè dividendosi le cellule trovano un ostacolo per cui non si dividono più in maniera buona, diciamo, come prima. Allora io mi chiedo se rispetto anche alla prevenzione e alla terapia non si sposti la cosa sul dispositivo immunitario, perché la divisione cellulare avviene fin dalla nascita e sempre. Quello che accade è che a un certo punto questa divisione non avviene più in maniera efficace e di qualità. Allora non può essere qualcosa che implica il dispositivo immunitario.
Well, I agree with you about everything except the possibility with the immune system. And so you're right. I mean, the accident happens not at the gene level. If the generation of aneuploidy, for sure. Whether that's cancer is yet another question. But the generation of aneuploidy is actually a mechanical accident. At this that picture when they put it apart, when that doesn't happen symmetrically, when this Okay, when this one snaps, then this pair goes over. So it's an accident at a very different level. It's at a mechanical level rather than at a genetic level. And typically, again, as you said correctly, that is actually often lethal. It's a negative thing. You may missing a cell that is losing a chromosome might be not viable and pass away. But occasionally, like in roulette, you may get a combination that in a body that is actually like an intensive care station that provides everything in food in terms of makes it very easy. It may even live better than a normal cell, and then you get cancer. Now the immune system, that is unfortunately, that is a very clear answer. There is no hope that the immune system will ever work against cancer. Whatever you have in the cancer cell is made entirely out of your own material, and it's not going to be antigenic. This immune surveillance hypothesis is now almost as old as cancer research. People have tried it forever, and it does not work. Everything that the cancer cell has to offer is already there. It's just rearranged and unbalanced and screwed around. There are not new sentences. It's just that you take a set, remember this Encyclopedia Britannica, and throw a few volumes out and put a few extra in and rearrange sentences, but you don't write a new sentence. The immune system can only see something that hasn't been there before, something that's foreign. But all the things you do here, you screw up. A good analogy would be, that I often use, the cell is a bit like a car factory. And there is an assembly line for wheels, an assembly line for bodies, an assembly line for brakes and steering wheels. And when they're right balanced, you get out your perfect Mercedes or Cadillac, whatever you like. But if you unbalance these, if you say, okay, I put in 3 assembly lines for steering wheels and leave out the brakes, and five extra ones for wheels, you have a car with 7 wheels, no brakes, and a steering wheel. These are all normal components, but that thing would look like nothing they have ever seen before. That is actually the cancer cell. It would move, but it would not be recognized in any part as foreign. So the immune system has never worked. See, a third of us in a lifetime develop cancer, and certainly a third of us are not immunodeficiency patients, or have an immunodeficiency, or AIDS patients, as you call them now. So cancer starts with a perfect immune system, and the immune system can't see it, because it's entirely your own material. So the immune system will never help against cancer. That is, whether you call it optimistic or pessimistic, that is realistic. Yeah. There is no chance. People have tried it forever. Paul Ehrlich was one of the first to start that, who worked with Koch, the Salvesan, the syphilis man. Early century, Sir MacFarlane Bennett, Nobel Prize, and so has tried it. George Klein has tried it. And now all with the Milstein, Cesar Milstein, Köhler, and all the people with the hybridomas, they make high titers of antibody and try to cure cancer. Niente came out of it. Doesn't work. And theoretically, it can't work, but they don't want to believe it. They would like it to work, because thinking is always in terms of germs. Everybody thinks germs. They're all Robert Kochs and Pasteurs in their minds, at least in the small part of the brain that is highly hardwired, that you can't change. They're all little micro-punters. No matter what it is, they don't want to believe it, they see it otherwise. They see it in an enemy must be antigenic, so the immune system should work. And they've tried it and tried it and tried it. It hasn't never worked. And it never will in this case. It's not from the outside. So that part is not going to work.
Diciamo che quello che il discorso medico intende con il sistema immunitario andrebbe messo in discussione. Questo è analizzato e messo in discussione, evidentemente. Chiaro? Ma loro per formula il sistema immunitario già intendono una cosa che non è dispositivo immunitario. Allora, sentiamo David Rasnick per un breve intervento, no? Sì. Infatti l'oscillazione è stata da Elisabetta, l'oscillazione è stata dal dispositivo al sistema. Quindi è già un'altra cosa.
I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry over 20 years, and I can tell you my view of trying to treat cancer with radiation and chemotherapy is like trying to repair a wristwatch with a hammer. It's an abject failure. I don't know what the other people think about it. There's the treatments for cancer work only very rarely, and in some special cases, some blood cancers it seemed to be, some leukemias and lymphomas and things. Those are the ones that they tout as the great successes. The solid cancers, though, they're virtually no success. Surgery can provide some relief. You just physically remove the tumor, and that will give you some short-term relief, maybe long-term. But then they follow that up with chemotherapy and radiation, and that just makes it worse. You're absolutely miserable in the process of taking these things. And then, how much sense does it make treating cancer with carcinogenic reagents? Radiation causes cancer. Chemotherapies cause cancer. They're carcinogenic. I've talked with collaborated with some oncologists, brain cancer and lung cancer, two of the really lethal cancers. And these are some of the most sober people you've ever seen, have absolutely no sense of humor that I can detect. They say by the time, they're nice guys, but you'll see why they don't really laugh much. They told us that by the time they see a patient, they're dead in 6 months generally, whether they get treated or they don't get treated. So 95% of their patients are dead in 6 months by the time they see them, whether they get treated or they don't get treated. And if I had those odds, I think I would let the cancer take care of me rather than the drugs or whatever else they give them. All right, that's the bad news, and I think everybody knows the bad news pretty much. I'll tell you why I'm more optimistic, and I'm born an optimist. I'll probably go to my grave an optimist, so I'm really an optimist. The aneuploidy, the aneuploidy theory that Peter and I have revived.
Allora in questo caso possiamo dire che l'ottimista, allora rovesciando, in questo caso possiamo dire che l'ottimista è un pessimista astuto.
Okay, I'll accept that. Actually, I see some opportunities. Maybe because I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for a long time, and you're always trying to find an angle, the weak spot. of something, whether it's been arthritis, cancer, emphysema, parasitic diseases. There's always a weak spot somewhere. And we haven't found too many weak spots with cancer, that's for sure. Aneuploidy has provided me, at least, I think, with the first little crack in the door about how to go after cancer. As Peter has already mentioned, these aneuploid cells are damaged cells. They're not healthy. They generally die. So that's one nice clue. Being aneuploid is not good. And in a competition, let's say in a laboratory, if you try to culture cells, you take the normal cells out of your body and you take a cancer cell out of your body, and you try to culture them in a laboratory in tissue culture experiments. It's difficult to culture normal cells, but they've figured out how to do it over the years. So now they can do it fairly reliably. It's very, very difficult to culture cancer cells. There's a variety called the HeLa cells from Henrietta Lacks, a black lady who died in 1956 from cervical cancer. And they took some of her cells, and they're all over the world now. And everybody thinks that's a typical cancer. That's so, immortal. Cancers are immortal cells. You hear this. It's based on this notion of the HeLa cells, for example, that have lived way longer than any human being could. The HeLa cells are extraordinarily exceptional. Almost all cancers you cannot culture outside of a few 2, 3, 4, or 5 cell divisions outside of the body. They're very wimpy cells. They're barely with us. The body provides, Peter says, and he's right in this, absolutely, literally right. Cancer cells are parasites. They absolutely need us in order to survive. You take the cancer cells out of our body, they die really, really quick. They need us. They're not clever, though, because they ultimately commit suicide by killing us. But anyway, the fact that these aneuploid cells are wimpy, they don't live very long outside the body, they're very marginal, led me to a new metaphor. Remember I told you the war metaphor was the one that we're currently working under. That's why, the war on AIDS, the war on cancer, that means use your military might, use your chemotherapy, use your radiation, use these really harsh, strong things because that enemy is so strong and harsh, Turns out that enemy is really very weak. And using these nuclear weapons, so to speak, of radiation and chemotherapy to kill these weak, wimpy, I know this sounds very odd, me saying this about cancer cells, but this is the way I see it now. Makes no sense because you're killing yourself too in the process. So I've come up with another analogy, and I believe the people that were here 6 months ago heard this, and I still got to come up with a better metaphor, or a better example. But I view the new approach to cancer treatment as, we have to become better gardeners. Isn't that a much nicer idea, than the war metaphor where we're blowing everything up, irradiating people, causing cancer. And I tell you why. I mean, literally why I say better gardener. Because here's my little analogy. Think of very finicky plants. The ones that come to my mind are the African violet. Some of you might remember this a little bit, the African violet, or let's say an orchid, a very finicky orchid or something. Now, if you had in a garden your African violet or an orchid that is very, very finicky, you could use the war metaphor. If you considered these marvelous plants to be weeds and you wanted to get rid of them, you could use the current paradigm or view of cancer, and you could go to your garden store and buy an herbicide, for example, and you spray your plants, with this herbicide. You spray your African violet or the orchid with this. You'll kill it. You'll certainly kill it. You'll also kill some of the other plants around there too. Who knows how many you'll kill. That's the chemotherapy radiation approach. Now, being a good gardener, you know the difference between all your plants. You know the ones that are hardy, you know the ones that take more care. And so if you wanted to get rid of your African violet, which I find almost impossible to keep one alive, so it's easy for me to get rid of one. I water it or feed it or whatever, it's guaranteed it'll die. All right? So what you would do in this case is that you learn about the cancer, you learn about what it needs to live. We know it can't live outside of the body well at all. It requires the body to live. We now learn the body cancer environment. All research that I'm aware of right now focuses on the cancer. We forget that it's in a human being. All right? We look at these cells. We take the cells outside of a body. Very few cancer cells can we culture, so mostly we make them, from animals or something. And there are some human cancers that they have been able to culture. And then we study these and we treat them and we learn about this. We totally forget and ignore that these things originated in a person. So the aneuploidy and good gardener metaphor means that we study the environment that nurtures these cancers. What do they need in order to survive? They're very finicky. They have very finicky requirements. And so in the case of the African violet, you give it a little bit too much water, a little too less water, a little bit too much sunlight, a little too little sunlight, for example. The African violet's gone. But the other plants are very hardy. They don't know the difference. I've got a rubber plant at home. If I water it, it lives. If I don't water it, it lives. It's a very difficult plant to hurt. That's a good, healthy body, is like that rubber plant that I have. It can take lots of hits, but the African violet can't. Now that's all fine and good, what I just said, and it's very poetic, metaphorical, and all that. But I can actually, I think, as a scientist, apply that metaphor and that understanding. There's many aspects. I'm not a nutritionist, but this also, as you might imagine, it might lead into and justify some of the approaches to nutrition and some of the other things. In other words, change the host. Don't focus on the cancer, focus on the host, focus on the person. The aneuploidy hypothesis and this good gardener hypothesis is the only explanation I know of for the rare, very rare, but documented spontaneous, improvements, cures, spontaneous cures, that people get better without it. Time to go?
Interessante.
Oh, keep going? Okay, I'm almost finished. Almost finished. The southerner is coming out now, you can see. So there's lots of justifications. The aneuploidy hypothesis provides lots of justifications for looking at different non-lethal ways of going about this. I, as a chemist, as a guy who's spent 25 years looking at enzymes and making protease inhibitors, I could even apply my feel to it. These aneuploid cancer cells secrete all sorts of enzymes and other proteins and things that are involved in their aggressive properties that allows them to invade tissues, to metastasize and go to other places, and really causes many of their very serious lethal properties. I happen to know some of these enzymes very well, these very digestive enzymes. They're outside the cancer cell, and all cancer cells use these enzymes to metastasize and to invade other tissues. So how I would apply this in my field is that I would make inhibitors, broad spectrum inhibitors, get away from this notion of specificity, and go after those enzymes that are not present in the normal healthy state. And I've spent 25 years of my life working in this area, and I know that almost all of these enzymes that are extracellular, these cysteine proteases, for example, that are extracellular in cancer cells, are not out there in normal healthy cells. Perfect target to go after. Inhibit these guys, essentially starve them. That would be starving these cancer cells the same way you would be starving the African violet or the orchid by giving it a little too much water and not too much water or something like that. So You can actually, metaphors are powerful. You know, they allow you to think in new ways and to communicate to other people, you know, your thinking, so that it allows them to think in new ways. Now, Peter may be right. After all this beautiful idea and these wonderful things, I might spend 10 years on this and it fails. There's that possibility. But it might work too. I'm done. Thanks.
Corbett ha chiesto di parlare? Perché dovevamo andare, vuole farlo adesso, subito o domani mattina? Subito? Domani mattina? Così elabora ulteriormente, no, la questione? Perfetto. Sì, quindi noi abbiamo oggi praticamente avviato il dibattito, no? Abbiamo stabilito alcuni termini. Appena avviato, no? Sentiremo anche i nostri due amici, no? Che insegnano a Trieste e anche Sassone, no? Antonio Sassone, anche altri che sono appena intervenuti e devono ancora svolgere effettivamente il loro intervento, altri arriveranno ancora, quindi insomma proseguiremo domani mattina. Adesso andiamo a cena passando dalla caffetteria e visitando Anna Maria Turchetto di là. Grazie. Per favore consegnate gli apparecchi, non portateli via, gli apparecchi consegnateli in fondo. Grazie.